Hello, disruptors. Welcome back to Practice Disrupted. As we celebrate 140 episodes co-hosted with Janine, we're using this break to revisit some of our most popular episodes that have yet to be rerun. Stay tuned for a journey down memory lane, and don't forget, Season 8 kicks off on February 15th. Let's dive in. This episode is sponsored by Monograph and Arc IT. You'll hear more about them later on in the episode. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Janine Chastain. We're collaborating on curated conversations to explore how the industry of architecture is changing.
Together, we'll find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects.
Welcome to Practice Disrupted.
Hello, listeners. Hello, Janine.
Hi, Evelyn. Hi, Disruptors.
So we are continuing our Architecture and series and exploring the tech industry again. And before you roll your eyes at me, what I ultimately hope that our listeners get out of these conversations is twofold. One, that the path for architects within technology is pretty limitless and doesn't stop with just UX. And I would argue that the path for architects within other industries are also pretty limitless, and there's greater opportunity out there if you explore. And two, specifically with CANOA and our next guest, Federico, that there are opportunities to rethink design within the built environment and how we have always done things.
What I will say about our guest today, Federico, is that he has been name dropped on our podcast a few times, and he has made his way through different career pivot points where he went from architecture into technology, kind of looking at both sides of those career paths and how they interact and merge. And he has taken what he's learned and shifted away from being in what he describes as disrupting the industry to taking ownership of his projects to be a force of change in the work that he's creating. So we're excited to learn more about the work that he's doing now and some of his career steps forward into this point. So Federico, welcome to the show. We're going to pass it off to you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you to the both of you for having me. That's a pretty flattering introduction. Look, I'm super happy to be here. The short version of my introduction is I'm Federico. I'm an architect by training. I am the founder and CEO of a company called CANOA, which we'll sort of dive into, I'm sure, later on. It's funny, you guys describe my career as a sort of series of like pivots and shifts. I see it quite linearly looking back, which maybe is part of the reason what makes I think my story a little bit different. But anywho, very happy to be here and sort of dive into all of this with the both of you.
I think that the reason I see it as pivots is just that you seemed attracted towards career steps that were kind of outside the norm, maybe for how a lot of architects were practicing 10 years ago. And I would say that you took risks within the steps that you took, even if they were linear and aligned to the profession in some way. Maybe we should talk about a couple of those steps. So first, starting off at shop, and then jumping into your next, let's say, jump, not pivot.
So I started my career at Shop Architects. I graduated in 2004 from Parsons with my Master of Architecture. At the time, Corey and Bill Sharpless were both professors at Parsons. There was a wonderful community of what I would call sort of like early career practitioners at Parsons at the time, and I got to take a couple of their courses and then eventually sort of join the company. So I started working with them in my last year. Throughout that last year, oddly enough, building a lot of their furniture in their office, and now I'm back in furniture again. So I started there and saw from 2004 through 2008 at the first sort of big recession in my career that I've seen, there was this explosion of work, especially in New York, and shop really got to ride that wave. A lot of that was in condo work, in high-end residential, and then expanded into other things, of course, like institutional, and even worked with the city, with the East River. So I got, to experience a lot of that early on. It was pretty amazing. And at the time, we were talking a lot about how, and I do credit, Shop and the partners there for a lot of this talk, but they were really trying to figure out ways to change a little bit the business model. Arguably, they probably didn't to a degree. I think they win a lot of business in the way that they practice. But they were trying to expand into development. They were trying to expand into construction. And one of the areas we were trying to expand into was technology. In 2008, as the crash was beginning, if you will, a lot of business for a lot of architects started to go on hold. A lot of people, just a lot of banks, obviously, where most of the money comes in for development, were effectively stopped in their tracks. And so Dave, which I know you've had on the podcast before, and Steve and myself, who were inside, we decided we wanted to take the leap and jump into pure technology consulting at the time. And so we took it as an opportunity. We used to say that, like, while the industry was had been like super awash with work and billable hours for a decade, they hadn't really made investments in modernizing at all. And so we saw that as an opportunity for us to say, okay, while everybody is kind of like slamming the brakes and even going into reverse, can we just go full speed ahead as like this little 3-person company? And so that was really our approach from day one, is to say, can we help people? Can we help businesses, in architecture, in design, use technology better to be able to reinvent themselves, to be able to do better work, to be able to hire better talent, all of these kinds of things. And so we were obviously young and super excited, and we thought we were going to change the world. But it worked. Convincing enough people to give us small $10,000 contracts was enough to get us out of the gate, and that's how Case started. We didn't really see ourselves as we got this all the time. A lot of friends and people were like, "Oh, you're leaving design. How could you leave shop and this and that?" And we never saw it that way. We never saw it as leaving design. We saw it as leaving practice, which is different. And it really was this sort of like handheld way, or like structured way, in which practice is culturally and legally meant to function. And so for us, it was like, look, we even saw it, with highly specialized consultants like acousticians or lighting designers, or even the engineers. They felt freer than we did. And so we're like, well, we want to do that. We want to be able to sell other things and do other kind of cool work. And so we saw actually the removal of the term architect as kind of a freeing proposition, if you will.
Most people, when they think about starting something new from an architecture firm, I think the default is, let's go start our own firm, not like, let's start this specialty service that is actually consulting to architecture firms, which are notoriously known for like not paying consultants. Where does that historically, where does that entrepreneurial spirit stem from for you?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I think Dave and I always had this sort of itch. There was always something we were kind of plotting. Like, even internally at Shop, we had this like design technology group, and even though the company, when I started, it was small, but by the time we left, it was probably like just under 100 people, which for Shop at the time was enormous. They're much bigger now, but even within that group, we were like, oh, let's start a technology group, and let's start this, and let's start that. There was always this Dave was this amazing person who was like, the first person to kind of drop everything and help people to workshop something or troubleshoot some software, or teach people or any of that. And so I think a lot of the early spirit of Case was to just try to cast a wider net, if you will, sort of be bigger in a way, talk to more people, get to work with more amazing people, including shop. And so I don't know, maybe part of this credit is maybe to a degree for our upbringing. Both Dave and I was born in Latin America, and so immigrated into this country. Dave is, heritage is he's Cuban American. He's from South Miami. Maybe as sort of immigrants, we kind of always felt that like anything was possible, and so like part of our responsibility is to just kind of go out and get it. This sort of like staying in our lane thing was not was not our thing in a way.
I kind of wonder, like, the fact that you both ended up at Shop, like, does a culture like Shop, and I know maybe we need to separate the culture that is at Shop now versus at Shop previously, but a culture like Shop that is trying to create innovation, like, does that attract people that think like that, or does it foster people who think like that? Or I don't know, it's kind of like chicken and the egg. What came first? Like, how did that produce people who wanted to go out and rethink the industry?
It was a really exciting place to be at the time. You looked around and every architect that was doing anything was like, this was the age of like the golden age, if you will, of this architect. It's kind of like fizzled away at this point, right? And now it even has, very sort of negative undertones. And at the time it was like, you looked around and it was all very much owned by the boomer generation. And so you had a handful of American studios that were smaller, that were younger, that were trying to look at things, I think, in a little bit of a different way, and very sort of founded on this idea that one of their main differentiators was going to be technology, but also this idea that you didn't have to wait till you were like well into your 60s to be successful. And so they were trying different things, and you got to give them a lot of credit for that. I think Greg and Bill and Corey, all three of them, in very different ways, you got to give them credit for trying lots of different things, and I think attracting a lot of talent that, if you look at it now, even the people who are, let's say, aside from the people who are still there, because they still have many people there from when I was there, but they've spawned a lot of other companies as well, right? Like a lot of people that have left Shop over the years have now gone on to do all kinds of amazing things, including in design. So I think it was a culturally significant moment for sure, and they were really talking about architecture in a really different way. And I will give Corey a lot of this credit. Probably above all, they always talked about architecture as a very valuable thing, as design as a very valuable thing, and never as this sort of like, thing that has to happen that people shouldn't get paid for. And so they valued what Shop was doing out of the market. It was an expensive practice to work with, but they did value that. So, it was refreshing for students to come in here, or young people would come in and say, oh, wait, what we do is actually a valuable thing, which was not what you'd hear even in school. Like I remember, how many professors had told me is like, oh, you're gonna be an architect, prepare to be poor. Like, well, I didn't make a lot of money by working at Shop, but the possibility that design could be reframed in a different way was very much alive. They even started a couple of other companies, right? They had like development group, they had a construction group, and so there was an entrepreneurial spirit within that practice at the time. I'm not sure if those things are still there or not, but but I know that they have a startup now. So it's. I think it is definitely part of the sort of genesis of all of this, if you will. Like that influence is real.
I think a lot of people are interested in Shop these days for a lot of different reasons. But I do remember, being in school and kind of feeling like that was like one of the firms, like you said, younger leadership, forward thinking, like that was one of the firms I think that a lot of my peers were naturally drawn to, or even just talked about or knew about because of the things that they were doing differently. I want to dive a little bit back into, so the story is Case obviously got bought by WeWork, and Dave ended up kind of on the people ops side of things, which led him to Teal. Where did your journey in WeWork kind of take you, and did it have any influence on where you've grown your new company?
of course, it certainly did. When I joined WeWork, I came on to be what at the time was called head of design, working really closely with Miguel McKelvey, who's one of the co-founders of the company and the chief creative officer, and the creative team that he had set up. It's a wonderful group of designers who had made something, I think, that was like really special. And so my role really was to help them scale this really precious thing that they had put together. And so we had been helping them from the outside for quite a bit. We had been, trying to, let's say, expose them to the way that retailers or hospitality companies worked, which was structured fundamentally different than a development company, which is kind of the structure that they had internally. And so we said, look, if development is meant to move slow because these are big and expensive decisions, retail or hospitality, rollout methodology is meant to move fast. And so, installing not just technology, but really a whole methodology of work internally, and was a big part of that sort of initial effort. And so my role there as head of design was to help take this thing, productize it, completely restructure and reframe the way in which we did work, and then grow into what we needed to be to make this product better, to be able to build it faster, to be able to guarantee quality control across the globe, not just in a few cities in the US, and to, above all, be able to cut costs drastically, because we were very much still living in the world of traditional retrofits, which were very, very expensive, very sort of like unique from one building to the next, all of that, which we had to figure out a way to build into our design framework as opposed to try to reject it. I think a lot of people try to kind of like, what I like to always call design out change. You're trying to like make this perfect thing, and the world is imperfect. So if you try to fight it, you will lose that fight. And so, part of all of this was to create a product that welcomed change, that expected it, and as a result of that you're able to adjust, able to accept the world in a very happy way, as opposed to in a way that that ends up requiring thousands of hours of meetings and coordination calls and little details and things that are all in an effort to in a way just occlude reality. Like we don't need to do that. So we really try to build a product and really a team first that would be able to think that way and to approach our product in a different way, and scale. So of course, opening buildings was the daily routine, if you will, but we're trying to do it with a different thought process. And so there was a little bit of a re-education. We went out there and got the best talent that we could, and I think that a lot of people who came through the system, I think, really appreciated it, and you see it a lot now. There's a lot of wonderful people that have gone on to, as they continue their careers, they're doing amazing things. And I think taking a lot of the ideas that we had at WeWork and applying them in their specific fields or verticals or companies or whatever that may be.
I think we're interested to know, because like you said, those first folks who took that step away from traditional practice were kind of on the outside a little bit of the profession. And I think we're starting to see that change. But I'm curious, those early folks who stepped towards WeWork, what was it about them, or what was it about the culture of the company that really attracted them? What are the themes that we could learn from in terms of creating better cultures even within architecture?
You have to inspire people, no matter what, right? And so I think at the end of the day, you have to stand for something, right? And I think where a lot of, I can sort of go deep into what I think is wrong with architectural practice, but I'll say one thing: architecture and consulting are not the same thing. And I think that architects who have become consultants have become really great at not taking a position at anything ever. And that's just not inspiring. right? It might be okay for business, but it's just not inspiring. And so I think talent is going to go where talent wants to go, especially in today's job market. And what they're looking for is to be part of something that they believe in, that's representative of their values, if you will. And I'm sure Dave talked a lot about this. And I think that WeWork fairly early on tapped into this idea that, like, it's not something new, that a lot of really great talent in architecture is a little bored. And so we just sort of tapped into that and said, hey, well, there's going to be a lot of things here, but boredom is not one of them. So come on over. And I think they were excited. They were excited that, like, next to them was a mechanical engineer, and across the table on the other side was a technologist, and over on the other side was an acquisition, and over on the other side was a construction manager, right? Like, they never worked in a place like that. They worked in a place where you walk in and, out of 198 people are architects. And so that's not diverse. It's not in any way sort of like, you're learning a craft, which is great, but you're not seeing other perspectives. And when you do get to see other perspectives, this is why I like to say, like, you walk down the office in a typical architecture day and everybody's in meetings, because it's actually kind of nice to go see what other people think, right? Like you want to go talk to these consultants. I mean, you're paying them money, which is kind of an odd thing, but like at the end of the day, it's like, I really do wonder what the structural engineer thinks about this, or what the acquisition thinks about that, because they see the world a little bit differently than you. Wouldn't it be wonderful for you to be able to work with those people next to you all the time? And so cross-functional teams were core to WeWork, and they are not core to the way that architecture is practiced. And so I think that was a completely different culture than what people were used to. And so it was super dynamic. It was really diverse from the point of view of expertise, and that was pretty amazing. And then once that word started getting out, right, then we like to say at the beginning, it's like look, our tactic initially, because when we started, or when we came over for the first time, I would say that talent acquisition was hard, right? Like, nobody really knew what WeWork was, or if they knew, they were like, what? Like, you're gonna go work for like this like owner? Like, there's like, this was a time when going to work for like the client side was sacrilegious. You couldn't do that. Like, you're selling yourself up. And so we had to reposition that storyline. And I would always tell the stories. I was like, there was a time when, like, if you were an amazing brand strategist, you would never go work at like, in-house at a brand. You want to work for one of the big 5 agencies. But then, like, the Nikes of the world came through, and like now you have, like, on the tech side, like the Airbnbs of the world came through, or the Figmas of the world come through. And like, what ends up happening is that being on the client side or being at the agency not only become comparable, but potentially in some brands, it actually even becomes better to be on the client side. And so, like, what's the client side of architecture? What's the client side of interiors? And WeWork became that. I mean, we used to say, like, there was a time when nobody knew Nike, and now every industrial designer and brand strategist wants to be at Nike, wants to have Nike on their resume, right? And so, can we do that for workplace design? Can we do that? Like, there was, if you had WeWork on your resume, we dreamed of a moment where, and obviously the ending was very different from what we expected, but we tried to visualize a time when everybody would want somebody in their workplace team that had WeWork on their resume. And so how do you make that happen? How do you design that culture? How do you design this idea? And you have to sort of make this happen. And that includes giving people the room and the autonomy to be really truly creative, and to sort of come together and to say, like, no, like, what you do is actually really valuable. What you do is going to change a lot of people's lives, and so you give them the room for it. You don't just say it's like okay to do this 20% of your time. Like, no, this is your core job. Now, let's go do it, and let's go build this amazing product and just make it better and better and better and better. And so I think that all of those things together created this environment that all of a sudden, became quite an attractive thing to do. We were also, like, paying better. Like, let's just be super honest, right? Like, our benefits were better and our pay was better than your typical firm, and we could afford to do that, not only because we are, of course, VC funded, but because because in the scheme of things, the salaries of our team, against a product that you're going to manage for 15 years was nothing. And so, this idea of what would get outsourced, what wouldn't get outsourced, and all of that, it just became completely obvious. It's like, look, your product team has to be internal, and it makes complete sense because a few amazing product people can make a huge impact. So look, all of those things together, worked, and I think and we didn't invent it, right? Like Starbucks did it in its time, in its heyday, and Disney did it before, and McDonald's, and like a bunch of people, hospitality companies have had this model. We were just, I think, the first to do it in workplace. A lot of people compared us to Regis, with all due respect to Regis, like their product is terrible. And so like, nobody wants to go work at Regis. So you bring all of those things together, and all of a sudden, I think you have the beginnings of something that can be pretty special.
Let's take a break from this conversation to talk about our sponsor of this episode, Monograph. We're proud to partner with Monograph because they are helping to transform the practice of architecture, one design studio at a time.
Tired of using dated and clunky software to manage your firm? Or do you feel frustrated wrangling all of your spreadsheets to get a clear view of where your project stands today? Monograph is here to help.
Designed by architects for architects, Monograph allows you to track your time, your projects, and your budgets in real time. With their awesome Money Gantt, you can immediately understand project performance across your entire firm portfolio.
Need to adjust your projects week to week? Their new tool, Resource, allows you to reallocate your team's time and track its impact on your remaining budget.
Be proactive with Monograph. Our friends at ArcIT are helping architecture firms with their technology solutions, including fighting back against ransomware and cybersecurity attacks. They recently told us about one San Francisco-based design firm they help who had 3 ransomware attacks in a span of 6 months. Their latest hit took their generic IT provider over 7 days to recover the data.
Yikes. Imagine not having access to your project data for over 7 days. For a mid-sized firm of 40 people, that's a lot of people not having the ability to do work on their projects.
Cyber attacks are a growing challenge in the hybrid world, and they are costly. The firm leadership estimated that the pure financial cost of the business was just over $100K, not accounting for the tremendous mental pressure the team experienced during the attack and subsequent recovery. However, it's important to mention that proactive architecture firms can get ahead of these type of technology threats.
As you consider your technology infrastructure needs for your business, be sure to check out ArcIT. They're a trusted IT provider who is in the business of helping architecture firms, and they offer tailored solutions for design studios, small, mid-size, and large.
ArcIT is offering a free 15-minute cybersecurity assessment to help you determine how secure your business is. During the assessment, ArcIT will help you identify your top 3 highest risk areas in your business.
Speaking of risks, ArcIT is also sharing some helpful tips with practice-disrupted listeners that you can implement tomorrow to ensure your business is secure from cybersecurity threats.
Their latest tip is to secure your endpoints, your Windows or Mac OS device with business-grade antivirus, URL filtering solution, and OS Plus application patch management solution.
Tune in next week to hear the next tip from ArcIT. To take your security solutions further, contact ArcIT at www.getarcit.com/PD to set up your free 15-minute cybersecurity assessment, or speak to them about custom solutions for your design firm. I think what I most appreciate about the WeWork as a case study is that there was an attempt to really address the problems and to design solutions instead of ignore the problems and hope they go away. And so I think everybody that I talked to that has been on the show that spent time at WeWork talks a lot about the different ways that those problems were addressed from a business model standpoint. And so I really appreciate you talking about breaking away the barriers that most often occur within a typical team and firm structure. I think that cross-team dynamic is really important as a concept. And if anywhere, like I hope that on this show you feel totally empowered to talk about the flaws of the industry of architecture, because we're all about it. And so, feel free to lean further into that.
I mean, look, I think that architectural practice and I have like zero basis in terms of research to back this up. But this is what it feels like to me. And I left it fairly early in my career. So what I would say is that architectural practice, that the framework works great up to a certain scale. It's a framework that I think is good for small firms. I think at a certain scale, you become inevitably a click farm, right? Like you're hiring, you're sort of trying to acquire labor as cheaply as possible and repackage it and sell it for profit. And that comes with some really, really difficult cultural problems. And you're trying to, and like, look, at the end of the day, architects either sell compliance or they sell aspiration. And if you sell aspiration, like you have a tension there that cannot easily be resolved. Like you can't sell the aspiration of a better world through how we have an impact on our built environment, while at the same time having a business model that depends on, trying to squeeze out as much as you can from employees. And then, and every architecture firm does this every 10 years or so. There's a lot of work, you hire a lot of people, then there's less work, and so you fire them. And then you have work and you have a lot of people, and then there's less work and you hire them. And so there's people out there like Phil Bernstein who have studied this and are probably much more eloquent at talking about it than I have. But the problem to me is not architecture in of itself, is the vehicle. The business model of it is one model for it. It can't be the only one, right? And so why can't we have other versions? Why can't we have other ways of practicing? And the reality is, and that's that when you really begin to sort of scratch on this, is that they do exist. There are other ways of being a designer out there in the spatial world. They're just not wrapped in this word architect. And so again, this is where like the freedom comes through. Like there's amazing interior design firms that do all kinds of work, which traditionally could be considered architecture, but like they don't use that word, and they charge better. they have a better ability to collaborate and to hire different kinds of folks. They're, not to say that interior design is better as a whole, but like they're definitely not bound in that sort of way. There's plenty of interior designers out there who are also terrible, but you begin to see now, and I think that hopefully what WeWork did was to make it okay to not work to not just be at a firm, and that it's okay to go work on the client side. It's okay to go work at a product company. It's okay to do these things. Not only is it okay, it's actually probably more fun. And then you got to the point, or even very quickly over the arc of time there, where like all of a sudden we started to get a ton of resumes from people who were just coming out of school, because for them, the FOMO of seeing all of their friends going to work at like, Stripe and Slack or whatever, like, what am I going to do? Go work for like, some 72-year-old person who like it just doesn't even understand the world as it is today in the 21st century. And so it just like the lack of connectivity there, or the lack of context in a lot of those companies and a lot of those firms was just so significant that you walked into them and it already felt like dated. I mean, I would even, I won't say it publicly, but I would even go as far as to say that even some of the younger generation that like still got caught up in that sort of 20th century model, you walk into those companies today and they still feel dated, even though partnership isn't that old, right? And so, I think it's a scaling problem. I really do. I think boutique firms do awesome work, and I think that as long as they treat their employees and their customers that's totally fine. But I think that when you go into the tens and hundreds and even thousands of people, you have some real issues to have to try to work out, because feeding that machine is not easy. And even with all of the best of intentions, it's a hard thing to do. So either go into so like you have to go into parallel fields, you got to get into more strategy, you have to get into more technology. Like there are companies out there that are doing really amazing work there, and to sort of like expanding their work into other fields, so that so that the ebbs and flows of physical work aren't the only things that define them. But there's many who aren't. I think at the core of it all is just mostly a lack of creativity. It's like you've been handed this manual, right? Like professional manual of what you're supposed to do, and you don't even question it. You just kind of like go with it. Like it's kind of crazy to me. Like it's like cool, but no. Like why would we do this? This is probably why I don't know. I would never probably get invited to anything that has to do with AI, but like I don't think that like the effort that the whole industry puts on tradition is well-founded. I think actually is quite destructive. And I think that it requires a whole reconstruction. And I hope that it happens at some point, but I'm certainly not going to like wait around for it to happen myself. And I hope that people out there don't either. Like the world is wonderful and there's plenty of amazing places to go do work, including within firms, but it's not the only way. Like if you ever feel somehow or another you don't fit, you're right, you don't fit. So go somewhere else. It's not you, it's them. 100%.
It's interesting. I mean, this is obviously a conversation, and we could go this direction for much longer. I do want to talk about CANOA, but you know, what's interesting to me is that tradition, I think, is so tied to identity that what I feel a lot of architects even struggle with when they consider, do I stay in practice? Do I move away from practice? Is one, the tenuous path that they walked just to get to where they are, so heavens forbid they ever step off that path. But also like this idea of, if I'm not an architect, then who am I think is something that architects or people even with an architectural background kind of begin to struggle with.
Yeah, look, I get it, but it's also a way of keeping people in line, right? Like why couldn't you be the chief product officer somewhere, right? Like lawyers don't stop being lawyers because they're the chief legal officer at a company. Like it's not even a thought. It's kind of crazy to me. Like go be the chief product officer somewhere. Go be a chief creative officer somewhere. Go, like all of these roles and titles all exist. And actually they're becoming a lot more common. Chief architect, all of these things are out there, and they exist for good reason. I do think that this has to do with the, I don't know. For me, it always felt a little bit Orwellian. Like there's this idea that like if you kind of like step out of line, you're now shunned by everybody. It's like why? Like I don't know. I never finished passing my test, so I can't use that word. I'm a designer, but if you did and you're an architect, like go do whatever you want. Like it's to a degree, I think people have been taught that if you're not part of the pack, if you're not sort of following along, that in a way you're kind of leaving that tradition, and that's why I think it's actually quite destructive. I don't think it's healthy. I think if anything, companies, what I would love to see is a bunch of firms going out there and like severely increasing their diversity of different types of practitioners, and not just professionals in their mindset, but in like different kinds of fields of design, of project management, of strategy, of branding, of all of these kinds of things. And I think that any company that looks at it that way, or go the AE route, right, and go with engineering, like that's fine. Like, but I think those companies probably have a better, we'll have a better culture. We'll see. I don't know. I don't have I clearly don't have the solutions. I also can't necessarily sort of put my finger on the actual problem, other than, from a business perspective, other than just saying that like making people feel bad is certainly not productive. And it's certainly not like healthy. It's like, do what you need to do, support people the best you can. And if that means that they have to go elsewhere, then that means that they have to go elsewhere. I mean, how many conversations have we been on where like architects are complaining? It's like, oh, we take all this time to train them and then they leave. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, you build all of those hours, like they've made you money. Like you don't own these people. Like it just do what you need to, and they will do what they need to. Like it's not some like a lot of the language it's used is like really, really old school. And what's worse is that you hear all that language even with younger practitioners because they had to pay their dues. So now they're making other people pay. So the amount of gatekeeping in the industry is terrible. So I would say even more so than the actual sort of business vehicle, it's the culture. Like the culture is quite toxic. And so they're going to continue to have a brain drain for as long as that culture continues to be that way. Like it doesn't sound fun to go work at any of these companies. It sounds prestigious, but not fun. And at some point that's going to come up, to them. And I think it's already happening. The best talent coming out of school today, are they really going to like all of those names? Some are, some still are. But they're probably also going, to like the latest like housing startup or the latest like whatever startup. Like, why? Because their roommate is. And like, if their roommate's getting like these things called options in a company, why can't I get options in a company? Like, what's this partnership thing that I have to pay into it? Are you kidding me? But they're getting it for free, like as compensation. Like it doesn't even like even the methodology doesn't make sense. And so it's hard to compete with that from a talent perspective today.
I think you're hitting it spot on so many different elements that we try to talk about on the show, but definitely this talent angle, I think that you're 100%. And it's so funny to me that some people are just like scratching their heads going, where are all the architects? Where are all the designers that we need to be hiring right now? It's like, you kind of chased them away over the last 10 years. But I want to dive into how all of these things that we've talked about up until this point have gotten you to this next step that you're in your career. And I love it when one of our guests comes on the show and they have passions and values that overlap around the themes that we love. So yours hit into technology and climate, and you've created a company, CANOA. I'd love to hear from your own words, like what is the company? What's the vision for it? But also, how do you define your career now that you're in this different role? Like, are you a technologist? Are you a designer? Are you a climate activist? Like, what do you see your role as?
I'm not big on labels. I do think that I consider myself a designer. I consider myself an environmentalist for sure. I'm not sort of going out there and like I'd like to think that through our work we can have an impact, that I don't need to just go to like demonstrations all the time. I think that the world needs to change through everyday action, not just through these sort of like specific points, although that's important as well, but it's not my thing. We're a technology company that is trying to reinvent really the way that people design and shop for their offices and the way that they're managed, right? Like I'm still fundamentally completely in love with the workplace problem because it's such a difficult one. And so, after leaving WeWork and taking some time and all of this stuff, I said, what do I want to do? And that complete messiness of humans and like, our changing culture and need crashing into our existing cities and buildings just sounds completely wonderful to me, even though it's like a super messy world. And so we're like, okay, well, let's build some technology that is like custom made specifically for this completely forgotten sector of the industry. We like to say internally that those of us who are in commercial interiors and interior design, we've had to borrow technology from ground up construction forever. And it sucks, all of it. It's just not good enough. I used to, hawk Revit everywhere with Case as well. And we thought it was like the next great thing. And then before that, it was like, with Shop, it was CATIA, and then, of course, Rhino. And like, look, I'll be the first one. Actually, people even at CANOA hate this for me, but like I'll be the first one. I'll adopt anything. Like I'm the first one to sign up for every technology everywhere. Like I just love everything. And so that tinkering spirit is certainly one that we have, and we had a Case, and I think we took that through with us at WeWork as well. But everything felt blunt. Everything felt too heavy for the problem set that we had, that we were really trying to work through with CANOA and with the workplace. And it's the only reason why we ended up sort of with the product that we have, which is really just a really simple space planning tool with an embedded marketplace. It's all it is. Like imagine if you, like, number one, Like, really, do we need like all of these buttons and all of these tools? Like, really, we don't. And so we like to say, we just wanted to design an X-Acto knife in a world of like machetes and bazookas. All of those tools are great. They just do way too much. And two, it's like, why can I buy a car on my phone, but getting a chair for 10 people on my team is a 6-month ordeal. Being able to bring these sort of e-commerce type solutions and workflows into these companies is a big part of it, and all of it being driven by the simple fact that when you're operating space, not designing sort of big fancy new ones, but when you're operating space, the cycle of feedback, redesign, implement, feedback, redesign, implement is really tight and it's really fast. And so the reason why we love, FF&E and we love prefab and we love all these modular components and we think it's really the way to go is because it's fast and because it responds to the end user's needs. It's not something that is hypothetical about some future that's going to be amazing. And I'm sure it will be amazing, but it will be wrong. And so I'd rather be right and nearsighted than wrong and farsighted, right? Like I'd rather, you could walk into an amazing space that we're like, yeah, I wish we wouldn't have made that decision. How many times have we said that, right? And so the reality is that all of them, right? We had full teams at WeWork at some point when we were like really at mega growth that were knocking as much stuff down as they were putting up because the needs of our customers, of our actual users, were changing every day. And now with hybrid, that's exponential. And so the whole concept behind CANOA is that the needs of the workplace are such now that design and deployments have to go hand in hand. And that we have to make these spaces much more responsive than they used to be. And so why can't every company just have like their own virtual store, curated store that they go into and they buy all this stuff and they manage what they need to and all that stuff? Like that's really a vision, and we need to track all of it because also when you're done with it, we can't just throw it out either, right? And so it has to be this sort of ongoing relationship with the cut between us and the customer, but really ultimate with the customer and their end users. You want to be sort of tied together as closely as possible. It's a big vision from the perspective that we know that there's billions of square feet of this stuff out there in the world. Who knows what's going to happen to a lot of it over the next 10 years? What we do know is that all of it is going to change. And so we're just beginning to scratch the surface on what that gigantic problem set. But I can tell you one thing, like hawking gypsum board is not going to be one of them, right? And that's, what a lot of architects end up doing. It's like you can't tie all of your fees to just how much, of the stuff you sell out into the world. Like the stuff is going to end up in landfills. We know that all this stuff is going to change. And so we see a world where workplace behaves more like retail, behaves more like other parallel space types that are just much more flexible, right? Like retail reconfigures almost seasonally sometimes, right? Like Macy's does 5 reconfigurations a year and workplace doesn't. Really, it should. And why doesn't it? Because we continue to design it and build it the way that we used to. And so I think the product market fit of the way that the office was designed is now gone. And we are beginning to try to find what the new one may be. Nobody has the answer yet, but we know it's not what it used to be. And so what we tell customers, we have a gigantic opportunity to leap forward with hybrid towards something that is much lower carbon, much lighter on the planet, much more flexible, much higher degrees of engagement, because you're going to do it faster. You're going to get to iteration 6 or 7 by the time that the other way would have gotten you the first iteration. Right. And so speed and feedback and learning and all of these things that we talk about all the time become sort of crunched together. And so CANOA sits right at that nexus of all of these things coming together. At the end of the day, our business model is really simple. We sell stuff. We sell all of these objects and products, but we help you track them and all that stuff. But we want to make it fun. We want to why can't I have an amazing, little design tool where I can just right click and buy the stuff and why can't somebody just magically fulfill those orders on the backside without me having to really worry too much about it? And so we do see a world. This is probably our biggest kind of swing, and this is where we'll see how this all goes. But we do see a world where this sort of separation between, design and the end user, and like all of these steps between like, procurement and all these kinds of things just have to get so much tighter that the way in which we do them today just simply won't work for a vast majority of the market. It'll continue to work for some of it. For the like mega projects and all those kinds of things that architects sort of love to chase, that's great. But a vast proportion of the industry won't use that, right? Like the average lease in the U.S. is 7,500 square feet. It's not 75,000 or 7 million. It's 7,500, right? And so a lot of this work today happens sort of in the ether. I don't really know how, and you'll see. But it's a problem we love, and it's a problem that today has been put front and center in the conversation at every company's boardroom. We'd like to say like workplace teams are the sort of between them and HR, they're the unsung heroes of the pandemic. Like they've all been thrust into such strategic positions that without much help, to be frank. And now all of this stuff, all of these decisions have to be made. And the companies we love to work with are the ones that see their spaces as a fundamental part of their strategy for talent acquisition and talent retention, and as a way, and from a brand perspective, as the representational into where does it fit into their ESG goals, and where does it fit into like their storyline with the planet and their impact on it. And so if your company doesn't sort of think about those things, then we're probably not right for you. But the ones that are going in that direction, we all know what this problem is. We all know that it's difficult. And we all know that we need sort of different ways, we need to leap forward. And so we want to work with those folks. So that's where we are, and that's what we're doing. And yeah, and sort of unapologetically, we love it. So.
The interesting thing is you talk about these over robust tools, and you being this X-Acto knife in the tool set. But you're also putting into the hands of, people. I kind of laugh at all of the designs that I've gotten from people that have literally like office layouts, especially when I work for a commercial brokerage, that people laid out in Excel. So now, and I don't know how they did that. I mean, good for them for figuring out how to like lay things out on Excel is beyond me. But now you're placing in the hands of these individuals a much more powerful tool. So what does CANOA mean for architects? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? What should the boutique practicing architect be thinking about CANOA? Do I need to be following what you guys are doing and decide, am I going to be a partner with those guys, or how are we going to compete?
I'll start with the first part of that question, which is, or not really a question, but statements. We fundamentally believe in that design should be much more inclusive than it is. I think this sort of like, again, this back to this sort of gatekeeping that like, I have this knowledge and only I have it, and that's why you have to pay $650 an hour for it, is the wrong way to look at our industry. We need to be much more open and inclusive and affordable. And so we do see CANOA much more in the vein of something like a Squarespace or Webflow or these kinds of tools, which also in their own industries initially were feared, but now they're like, oh yeah, like, why can't I just make my own website? Like, do I really? and so we're not there yet, of course, but a part of our mission and part of the genesis of all of this stuff is to say, we need to give more people access to changing their own immediate physical environments. And how do we do that safely? How do we do that like in a really fun way? And so our tools is just, this drag and drop interface specifically for that. I think from that side, we definitely want to engage a wider audience than just sort of experts. That said, the experts themselves, I would say, we partner with designers. Mostly we partner with sort of, workplace designers and interior designers, less so architects, although many architects actually do sort of workplace design and would be happy to partner with them. We even have an affiliate program where we pay these people, where we bring them work, right? Because not every one of our customers wants to use what's sort of out of the box. They want something a little bit more white glove. They want something. And so we have an affiliate program that, where we bring these companies business as long as we have what I would say a similar mindset when it comes to the world of sustainability and the types of vendors and suppliers that we want to use and those kinds of things. But other than that, design what you will. So I'd say for those companies, we are definitely a partner. We're definitely competitive with the mega firm. mostly because we believe that it's just not the right vehicle for this type of stuff. You'll just be able to, well, like CANOA will just be cheaper and faster. And so if you're out there sort of hawking like 18-month delivery projects and like, traditional SD, DD, CD programs, and then CA and everything is like these, gigantic fees. I think for a lot of customers and workplace, that might still be okay. But I think culturally, more 21st century type businesses just won't operate that way any longer because just the risk is too high. Like, really, are you ready to make decisions that are 3 years out today? No. Like, people are happy to make 6-month decisions, maybe even 12-month decisions, but certainly not decisions about, constructing something that we think will maybe last 7 to 10 years when we know it won't. When a company's offices is which is certainly the case with a lot of tech companies and sort of knowledge workers, is such a significant part of their carbon footprint, you can't make those decisions anymore. You can't make a decision to the core and shell is one thing, but the interior is like build a theater, like really build nothing effectively. Just give me, big open bays of room, give me a ton of natural light, and give me, healthy ceiling, floor to ceiling heights. That's really all that workplace wants. And then inside of that, we'll figure it out. And that, and architects, I think traditionally, just don't necessarily know how to work into that mold if you're like the mega firm. I think smaller firms totally get it. So we love working with smaller firms who are younger. I would say if you started in the last 10 years and you're less than 20 people, you're probably our best partner, and we will bring you work. So reach out to us. If you're a couple thousand people and you're 100 years old, maybe look the other way for a while.
You talked a lot about company culture and the toxic culture that kind of is a part of architecture firms. And CANOA is not the first company that you've built. So have you taken the same X-Acto knife approach to how you want to carve out the company culture in CANOA, or what is your approach to creating company culture at this point?
I think it all starts with taking a stance. I think CANOA takes a big stance in the world. And so off the bat, it sort of attracts a kind of particular type of human, I think. If you have something like that to stand on, then everything else downstream from that is a little bit, call it easier, but it's simpler. I'd love to say that, we're tiny. And so company culture, especially in a fully remote world, which is the world we're living in today, I'd say the experience is quite different from what it was at Case. CANOA was started like 3 months before the pandemic hit widely. So like a lot of our decisions, are very much sort of born out of the pandemic. Like a lot of where we are today come out of this period. And so we consider ourselves fully a post-pandemic type of company because we probably would have made quite very different decisions had this not happened, including, who our customers are. At the beginning, our idea was to really go after the small business sector. And we ended up having to go completely pivot and to go up market into enterprise because the small business world just completely went away when it came to office space. And so, and that was effectively supplanted by work from home now, which is a whole other now industry that exists to support that. But it's, we're a little bit of an older company from in terms of like demographics, right? Like I would say that like, Case was a bunch of 20-some-year-olds. CANOA is not that. Like it's like a lot of us have worked together before. We've known each other for some time, so we're a little bit later in our career. It's a very small company. We're only 10 people. Everyone comes with a high degree of experience today, and so we took a little bit of a different approach to typical startup. Although I think a lot of startup people love this idea of like, oh, you just want you want a lot of hustlers. You want a lot of these people like people that don't sleep and work weekends. We are not that at all. Like we have super healthy benefits. We pay really well. We don't work on weekends. I don't work on weekends. It's a startup company for sure. And so like our growth objectives are significant, but we're trying to build something that lasts for a long time. And we're trying to build something that will still be there when our customers need us to be there 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And so Our goal is to build something that is founded on healthy practices, because we know that that's the only way that we're going to survive. And we have the experience of WeWork, which was not founded on healthy practices, and that did not survive, right? And so our only data point clearly shows us that you have to do it in a different way. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You might be able to get out of the gate. You might be able to grow really fast. You might be able to do all these things. But if you don't sort of work towards some sort of, if you're not founded upon something that's really solid, then it's going to be really hard for you to maintain that growth rate and that scalability. We are unapologetic about the fact that we want to be a very, very significant company. We are building what I would call the first post-pandemic design brand in America. We want to be something that in this century is really representative, and we're going after it full blown. And we're starting with the workplace because that's where we love that problem set. We're not going to be a small company. We're certainly not boutique. We are, we have aspirations and we have investments and we do have VC backing and all those kinds of things, but we're trying to do it our way. We'll see if we make it or not. But I tell you this, internally, we basically have two outcomes. Either we're going to be a giant, amazing, wonderful company, or we're going to completely not exist. There's no in between, because we're not here to shoot for the middle. We're going to, shoot for big. We're going to shoot for awesome and amazing. And then we're going to be proud that we tried, even if it doesn't work. What we cannot do is walk away and sort of have this itching feeling in the back of our mind that we didn't try to go after the big pot. And we want to. If Florence Noel was starting her company today, she would have a software component. Why does every company that have anything to do with the workplace today feel like they're 100-year-old companies? Because most of them are. And so, demographically speaking, we saw that there's a big opportunity here for us to just represent different type of culture and demographic in the way that we do things.
Thank you to ArcIT for their support of this episode. Don't forget to visit getarcit.com/PD to set up your free 15-minute cybersecurity assessment or custom solutions for your design firm.
Thank you again to our podcast partner, Monograph. Learn how Monograph can help you take control of your firm's financial health. Follow the link in our show notes or visit practiceofarchitecture.com/monograph so that Monograph knows that you heard about them from us.
Hi, Disruptors. If you like the content from today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast.
Be a part of the conversation by joining us, our speakers, and others in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is @practiceofarch. That's @practiceofarch. We love to hear from you. Drop us a note to say hello.
This show is part of Gable Media. You can learn more about other podcasts and video channels in our community by visiting gablmedia.com.
Thank you for joining us on Practice Disrupted, a podcast by Practice of Architecture. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.